All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Seeing that the board members are now present, Brooks, will you please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Member Burr.
Here.
President Darling Hammond.
Here.
Member Fatah.
Here.
Member Glover Woods.
Here.
Member McQuillan.
Here.
Member Navo. Member Patillo Brownson. Member Rodriguez.
Here.
Member Rucker.
Here.
Vice President Strauss.
Here.
Member Sun.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. I hereby call the March 2021 meeting of the State Board of Education to order at 2:35 p.m. And I'd like to commence by saluting the flag. Member Fatah, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Okay. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations, Member Fatah, on the college admissions that are rolling in. We're looking forward to the final decisions next meeting. Agenda 1 is our State Board priorities item, and I will launch us with just a few remarks. Welcoming you to our 3-day board meeting. We haven't had one of those for a while. We have a lot of ground to cover in these coming days, so I'm going to keep these remarks quite short. It is a milestone that we have recently passed, and we've turned a corner, and I think we're heading for a light at the end of the tunnel. It's been almost exactly 1 year since we were together and since normal in-person instruction across the state ceased. As educators, parents, and students pivoted to distance learning when we discovered COVID-19 in our state. And now we have a little bit of guitar music. I'll wait for that to... That was nice. And I think on that note, no pun intended, we'll just note that we are turning the corner, and we've learned a lot in this last year. Our public schools, as you know, have been heroic in getting meals and technology to students and families, and learning how to teach digitally and finding ways to wrap around some of our most vulnerable students. And meanwhile, we have learned how to test for and treat this disease and how to vaccinate against its worst effects. And vaccinations are now taking place at a rapidly growing rate, with priority for our educators, thankfully, along with other essential workers and for seniors. We are at a point where we can expect everyone to be vaccinated by summer, and we can celebrate the 4th of July with our families if we've done so. And we're seeing the momentum build across the state, with more and more schools announcing plans for the safe return of students, teachers, and staff to the classrooms that many have so sorely missed. The governor announced today that 9,000 schools have opened or have planned reopening dates in the coming days and weeks. And these include the largest and smallest districts that represent students across the spectrum, including the students who struggle the most. But beyond just bringing students back, the governor and the legislature have made a bold commitment to ensuring that our schools have the resources to surround students with the social, emotional, mental health, and academic support that they need to thrive now and in a post-pandemic world. SB 86, which the governor signed on March 5th, provides $6.6 billion, including $2 billion to provide resources for schools to provide in-person instruction this spring, and $4.6 billion for expanded learning opportunities that will give schools the funding and the flexibility to add blocks of learning time throughout the school year and in the summer. And the expanded learning resources really offer the schools the freedom to operate outside the constraints of the traditional agrarian calendar, hopefully in partnership with community-based organizations, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, camping organizations, and others this summer to provide an enriching, engaging, joyful set of learning opportunities that hopefully will reattach students to school, to each other, and to their teachers, and that wrap around them with social and emotional and mental health supports, as well as effective academic support and tutoring to accelerate their learning. We're hopeful that this can launch us on a path to reimagining schools so that they focus on the needs of the child rather than the clock or the calendar. And this work is really due to the amazing efforts of so many in our education community. In our deliberations over the course of this meeting, we can support this work with support for useful, informative assessments, additional funding and guidance for literacy development, and support for a culturally responsive and sustaining curriculum. So in advance for the good and hard work we will do this week, and also thank our entire community of educators and families for their focus and tenacity throughout this year of regrouping and rethinking everything about our education system. And I look forward to the days ahead as we return to and reinvent our schools. And with that, we can launch into our agenda. There is one item on the agenda that has an addendum. Item 2, the Every Student Succeeds Act, authorization to pursue flexibility on or waiver of assessment, accountability, and reporting requirements. There is one public hearing on the agenda, which we will take up tomorrow afternoon. That is item 8, a petition for the renewal of a charter school under the oversight of the local educational agency designated by the State Board of Education pursuant to California Education Code Section 47605K2E. And that is the consideration of the Ross Valley Charter, which was denied by the Ross Valley Elementary School District. The proposed regular consent items are items 5 and 6. The proposed waiver consent items are W2 through W11. In terms of changes in the agenda, we will reopen item 1 on Thursday afternoon to take up action on the draft meetings from our February meeting and receive our liaison reports. In terms of public input, members of the public wishing to call in for public comment should view the live stream of the meeting to know at what time public comment will occur for each item. Public comment may be provided by dialing the phone number, entering a participant access code, and then following the operator's prompts. Upon dialing in, callers will be added to a caller queue. The operator will notify callers when it is their turn to provide public comment. We will also ask callers to please turn down the speaker volume of their computers if they are following the live webcast to avoid an echoing effect. Public comment will be limited to 1 minute for each speaker. Item 10 is the general public comment item, during which members of the public may provide comment on matters that are not specifically listed on the board's agenda. Board members, please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Keep your cameras on at all times except during the schedule breaks to ensure that we maintain a quorum throughout today's virtual meeting. If you do need to take a break, turn off your camera and put a notice in the chat so that we know who has left. Try to be mindful that we want to keep a quorum at all times, so try to stagger any momentary breaks that you need to take during the course of the meeting. And then for each item on the agenda, there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand using the Zoom participant window if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. And with that, we're going to launch into item 2, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act authorization to pursue flexibility on or waiver of assessment, accountability, and reporting requirements. This item, as I noted, does have an addendum, and the CDE is proposing that LEAs be allowed to use the most viable option for assessment in their local context, including the Smarter Balanced Assessment, summative assessments, and alternative assessments for ELA and mathematics, or other diagnostic benchmark or interim assessments. And I will leave it to Rachel Maves and Mal Vang to discuss all the details as they present the item.
Thank you, President Darlene Hammond. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. Superintendent Thurman, President Darlene Hammond, and board members. I want to just start today with a few framing remarks as we come into this conversation about assessments once again to help us situate ourselves in the context, and then we'll go into the item in our slides. And our hope is that this kind of walks through the logic process of the proposal that we're bringing before you today. First, I just want to acknowledge some things from the heart, as a wise woman once told me. The pandemic has and continues to shake our world, disrupting the ways in which we interact as humans, while at the same time taking the lives of too many loved ones. In the shaking, it has become clear that the persistent gaps of inequitable access and opportunity in our educational systems have become chasms. While it may seem terribly out of place to talk about annual assessments right now, knowing the inequitable opportunities in our systems pre-COVID intensifies the need for us to assess and monitor student learning to ensure we are targeting instruction to best meet the needs of our most vulnerable students. In this context, it seems not only appropriate, but necessary. Over the course of several months, we have heard from a number of education leaders and teachers the traumatic impact and emotional toll an entire year of distance learning has had on the lives of our young people, school staff, and communities. We also know that every student's experience has been unique and that different parts of our state have seen much greater impact than others. At the same time, advocacy groups and policymakers are asking for more information to understand the impacts of the pandemic on California students. And parents in California and across the nation have clearly expressed the need to understand where their child is meeting or not meeting grade level expectations. We have tried to balance all of the concerns clearly expressed by the field and stakeholders to develop an approach that recognizes the reality of education during the pandemic, the need for educators to have sufficient data to understand the learning gaps and disparities, and the desire for parents to have information regarding their child's learning. The necessary flexibilities do not come without a cost. What we gain in allowing LEAs to utilize their locally chosen assessments, we lose in the normal comparable test results we get when all students take the same high quality assessment. However, we believe it is the best option during truly imperfect times. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Mao Vang, and she will begin to walk you through our item.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, Superintendent Thurman, President Darlene Hammond, and board members. I am Mao Vang, Director of the Assessment Development and Administration Division at the California Department of Education. The item before you is both an action and an information item. And later in my presentation, Rachel Mays will rejoin me. And then we also have present to assist with questions, Cindy Kazanas, who is the Director of the Accountability Measurement and Reporting Division, Jerry Winkler, Director of the Educational Data Management Division, and Mary Arcella, Executive Director of Educational Testing Service, and Tony Alpert, Executive Director of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. And with that, in today's presentation, we will be covering the flexibilities offered from the U.S. Department of Education, a review of the California State Board of Education, or SBE's actions taken on February 24th, our California's current context, stakeholder feedback, and the California Department of Education, or CDE's recommendation to the State Board of Education. This is a little bit busy, but I'd like to recap our recommendation for you. The California Department of Education, CDE, recommends that the California State Board of Education, SBE, delegate authority to CDE and the SBE Executive Director to prepare a general waiver to be submitted to the U.S. Department of Education to the extent necessary to include the following. That the CDE is proposing that for the 2020-21 school year, local educational agencies, or LEAs, be allowed to use the most viable option for assessment in their local context, including the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments and California Alternate Assessments, or CAAs, for English Language Arts, or ELA, and Mathematics, or other diagnostic benchmark or interim assessments that are aligned with the California Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts and Mathematics, are viable to assess students in grades 3 through 11 and grades 3 through 8, and grade 11, are uniformly administered across a grade span school or district, and provide results that can be reported to parents, guardians, educators about individual students, and the public by school and by district that are disaggregated by student group. As a brief reminder, we will start today with a quick overview of the flexibilities offered by the U.S. Department of Education. So remember, on February 22nd, 2021, 2 days before the State Board of Education's meeting in February, the ED sent a letter to states indicating that they can request a waiver to take advantage of the full flexibilities offered by the ED for the 2020-21 school year for the Accountability and School Identification Requirements in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, as amended in the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. On March 8th, the ED did release the accountability waiver template, and states receiving this waiver would not be required to implement and report the results of their accountability system. That includes calculating progress toward long-term goals and measurements of interim progress or indicators, and using data from the 2020-21 school year to annually differentiate among its public schools in a meaningful way. Furthermore, in addition, the states that are granted the waiver would not be required to identify schools for comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, and additional targeted support and improvement based on data from the 2020-21 school year. Okay. And they would be required to continue to support previously identified schools in the 2021-22 school year, resume school identification in fall 2022, and ensure transparency to parents and the public. So as a condition of receiving the waiver, states will continue to publicly report disaggregated chronic absenteeism data for 2020-21. So in addition to the flexibilities previously mentioned, the ED letter did indicate that indicated other measures to implement assessment flexibility. These include administering a shortened version of its statewide assessments, offering remote administration where feasible and or extending the testing window to the greatest extent practicable. So as noted during our previous board meeting, California, in a move to be proactive in meeting LEA's needs for additional flexibilities in the midst of this challenging year, the State Board of Education approved the use of the adjusted blueprints for the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for English Language Arts and Mathematics. The timing of the approval, which was in advance of the formal ED guidance letter, was required to allow sufficient time for our development and for the development and implementation, as well as administration of assessments. So with the SBE's approval in place, the CDE directed our state assessment contractor, ETS, to implement the adjusted forms in the California assessment system. The timeline of activities since November 2020 are as follows. In November 2020, the State Board of Education approved the adjusted Smarter Balanced Summative assessments for English language arts and mathematics blueprint. So in November through December, ETS and its subcontractor, Cambian, removed the original ELA and mathematics forms from the California assessment system. And then in January through February, systems testing with adjusted forms were conducted. And then on February 22nd, 2021, the adjusted Smarter Balance ELA and mathematics assessments were released to LEAs. There's been a number of questions recently, so I will just pause a little bit here and just do a quick overview of what we have so far in terms of testing at this point. As of today, we do have like roughly 14,000 of the Smarter Balance ELA and assessments in the process of being administered. There's 8,000 that have started the Smarter Balance summative assessments for math. And then over 11,000 California science tests have started, with over 9,000 completed. Roughly at this point in time, there's 294,000 English language arts, and then 306,000 mathematics Smarter Balance interim comprehensive assessments administered at this point. And then from our analysis, we found that it is clear many districts are focusing on the administration of the summative LPAC, with about 42% completed, representing about over 420,000 English learners at this point. And this is approximately 2 times more than the number of summative LPAC administered in 2019, which was the last year we had a full administration. And at that time, the LPAC was still paper pencil test, the summative LPAC. So to just to address some questions briefly from the field, to contrast the numbers in a normal year like in 2019, our last year of full implementation, by March 15th, we have about roughly 43,000 Smarter Balance English language arts tests in process, and about 19,000 in math a couple years ago. And then over 26,000 California science tests in progress, and 24,000 completed about 2 years ago at this point in time. And then roughly 370,000 English language arts and 350,000 mathematics Smarter Balance interim comprehensive assessments were administered at this time in 2019. So again, in 2019, the LPAC was still a paper test, and we estimated that approximately 182,000 students completed the summative LPAC based on the number of student documents that our testing vendor received at that time. And then this represented about 18% of our 2019 English learners eligible to take the summative LPAC at that time. So the testing counts for English language arts and mathematics are slightly lower at this moment compared to 2 years ago, while testing counts for the LPAC are much higher. So just wanted to bring a little recap so that people could kind of see where we are in testing at this point while I'm at this juncture. Then moving forward, in terms of continuing on with the estimated testing times for our Smarter Balance adjusted forms that were approved. As noted, we estimated that the adjusted forms will reduce testing time for English language arts and mathematics by about 1.5 to 2 hours, depending on the grade level. And then we focused on adjusting the English language arts and mathematics summative tests, because these tests impact the most students and are also the longest tests compared to the other CASP assessments. So it's important to note that the students' tests are not timed. LEAs have the authority to allow students to take as much time as they need, which helps them to demonstrate what they can do if they can have as much time as they need. And then students, as they begin to take a test during a session on a particular day, they can pause the test and restart it right where they left off on a different day in a different session if needed. And these assessments are not necessary to complete in one sitting. So furthermore, if a student should lose connectivity during a test session, the progress on their assessment will be saved and students continue where they left off. at a later time. So trying to think about all these different supports in terms of helping students to complete the assessments. That's how we came to the adjusted forms. And in preparation for this adjusted forms in fall 2020, we were committed, the CDE was committed to ensuring that the flexible options of the assessment administration, when it became clear that most LEAs would not be able to provide in-person instruction for students. We were committed to, we heard overwhelmingly that the field need to and have us realize the importance of allowing additional time to administer the optional summative LPAC for reclassification purposes. The flexible options allow for for LEAs to administer the initial LPAC starting last summer, and then the Smarter Balance interim assessments where students were in person or in remote. And the LEAs did have the option of testing students in person following their local health and safety guidelines, and testing students remotely using our electronics devices and tools that they did use or that they are using for distance learning as well. So these fall administrations led to multiple opportunities for local educational agencies, the CDE and ETS, to engage in a collaborative discussion regarding these assessment experience. So using the feedback from the field, we further refined and adjusted the processes in preparation for the spring administration window. So the feedback gave us a clear understanding that students must use the secure browser to take the assessments whether it is in person or remotely administered, which provides the appropriate level of test security, allowing us to maintain the assessment's validity and reliability as much as possible. So this collaborative work resulted in adding integrated remote administration features directly into the test delivery system. The CDE engaged with LEAs and technology companies such as Google and Apple and Microsoft in development and testing of these embedded remote administration features to ensure a platform that is responsive to the needs of the students and the test administrators or examiners as we explore an entirely new process and landscape for the administration of assessments. This remote testing functionality, or these remote testing functionalities include video monitoring, video calling, and text messaging. So the test examiners and test administrators can view students testing in real time by video, while also monitoring each student's progress through the tests. The video feed is similar to the grid of thumbnails viewed of an online meeting application, like what we're doing now. And as in previous administrations, the test administrator and test examiners can pause a student's test at any time, whether they are conducting a remote or in-person administration. So the test administrators and examiners and the student can communicate directly with each other through the test delivery system by a one-to-one video call or text message. Again, test administrators and examiners can also send out a broadcast message to all students in the testing session. So videos showing these remote administration processes are available on the CASP LPAC YouTube channel. And I just want to highlight that it's important to note that based on the current data for instructional modes, the majority of LEAs continue to be in distance learning. So although there are many returning, there's still the need for distance learning support. So the remote administration of assessments, whether we are doing summative, interim, or local assessments, will need to continue to be an option. CDE and ETS will continue to provide real-time support for remote administration of the summative and interim assessments through email. They could email our California Technical Support Center at caltac@ets.org, or phone the 800 number at 800-955-2954, and have live chats at the websites at caaspp.org and elpac.org, the CASP and LPAC websites. So these remote administration was provided for the optional summative LPAC in the fall, as I mentioned earlier, and the 2020-21 initial LPAC in the fall. And there was we have a full report of the results of the psychometric analyses conducted for the summative LPAC, and that is posted on our CDE LPAC webpage under our technical documents section at the link provided in the SBE March item addendum. So at this point, on the following slides, I will be recapping the motions that were made by the SBE on February 24th, and we will quickly review the 5 motions. Here, just to recap, the motion 1 was that the SBE directed CDE to prepare a waiver consistent with the federal template regarding the flexibilities offered by ED for accountability and school identification, which includes decoupling the accountability from this year's assessments and waiving the requirement that the academic achievement indicator, be adjusted to account for a participation rate below 95% as applicable. Motion 2 was to extend the 2020-22 or 21 tests administration window for both the CASP and LPAC to July 30, 2021 as applicable. And then motion 3 directs CDE to prepare a general waiver of the California Science Test for the 2020-21 school year. Motion 4, create a policy means to provide assessment information for this year to parents, educators, and the public, and delegate authority to the State Board of Education Executive Director in collaboration with CDE staff to develop a waiver proposal to bring back to the board that focuses on a plan for assessments that provide data to parents, educators, and the public, which monitors the progress of students in ELA and math, and that will propose a means for uniform reporting of that data in both aggregated and disaggregated forms. Excuse me, sorry, So I will review the motion specifically. In motion 1, we have, again, in terms of the flexibilities, motion 1 directed us, the CDE, to prepare a waiver that is consistent with the template regarding the flexibilities offered by ED for accountability and school identification, which includes the decoupling and accountability from this year's assessments and waiving the requirement that the academic achievement indicator be adjusted to account for participation below 95% as applicable. So this action relieves states of the requirement to identify comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, and additional targeted support and improvement schools, and removes the consequences associated with not meeting the 95% participation rate. So federal law requires 95% participation rate in both, participation in both assessment and accountability at the state, district, school, and student group levels. Accountability requirements tied to the 95% participation rate to the academic achievement indicator. The ED waived the tie to the academic achievement indicator, but not the requirement to assess the 95% of students. Therefore, the 95% requirement still stands, but there is no penalty if LEAs are unable to meet it. So it is important regardless of the assessment used that each LEA strive to ensure each student has the opportunity to prepare and participate in assessments to inform teaching and learning. So the CDE is currently preparing the accountability waiver template, as I mentioned, that was released by ED on March 8th, 2021. And we'll submit it to ED in keeping with the SBE action at the February meeting. So to ensure continued alignment with the federal and state accountability systems, the next step would be to request legislative action to remove the state accountability requirements. And this would include a request to waive the requirement to produce state indicators on the California School Dashboard and pause identification of LEAs for differentiated assistance based on data from the 2020-21 school year. Motion 2, the second motion extended the 2020-21 test administration window for both the CASP and LPAC to July 30, 2021 as applicable. So during the SBE meeting on February 24th, the board discussed 3 options regarding the assessment window. One option was no changes, keep the current regulations, which state an LEA's CASP assessment window will end on the last day of instruction, or July 15, whichever comes sooner. Or for those administering the LPAC, it would be May 31. Option 2 was to extend the window to July 30 for the CASP and LPAC. Or option 3 was to end the testing windows per current assessment regulations and add a new fall summative CASP and LPAC testing window. It could be made available from about August 15th through October 29th. After careful deliberation, the board chose to take action on extending assessment windows through July 30, 2021. So to meet this action, the CDE has prepared emergency regulations for both the CASP and the LPAC, extending the testing windows. And this is item 5 in the March 2021 SBE agenda. If an LEA's last day of instruction is May, for example, or beginning in June, this option would potentially add additional 6 to 8 weeks to the assessment window. While the expectation is not to bring students in over the summer solely to assess, it provides the opportunity for LEAs to assess students who are provided targeted instruction over the summer months in accordance with the California Assembly Bill 86. If feasible and appropriate, assessments could be administered during this time. As discussed during the board meeting on the 24th, a decision regarding the extension of the assessment window needed to be made at that time to ensure that our contractors could develop and prepare the necessary infrastructure for administration. As such, the option for fall administration or a fall assessment window no longer exists. The third motion directed the CDE to prepare a general waiver of the California Science Test for the 2020-21 school year. The intent of this SBE motion passed on February 24, 2021 was to waive all statewide science assessments. This is both the California Science Test and the California Alternate Assessment for Science. So with the approval of this motion, the SBE has directed the CDE to pursue a waiver to provide additional flexibility from testing to LEAs. As a reminder, the administration of statewide science assessments is required by state and federal laws. The CDE will prepare requests for waivers from both state and federal statewide science assessment requirements. The fourth and fifth motions are being combined. Motion 4 was for the CDE to create a policy means to provide assessment information this school year to parents, educators, and the public. Motion 5 delegated authority to the State Board of Education Executive Director in collaboration with the CDE staff to develop a waiver proposal to bring back to the board that focuses on a plan for assessment that provides data to parents, educators, and the public, which monitors the progress of students in English language arts and mathematics, and that will provide or propose a means for uniform reporting of that data in both aggregated and disaggregated forms. So the CDE is incorporating the response to Motion 4 as part of the plan outlined in Motion 5. The focus of today's item and the recommendation are to meet the requests from the State Board of Education as outlined in this motion. And with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Rachel Maves, our Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction of the Instruction and Measurement Branch. Rachel.
Thank you, Dr. Vang. So before we jump into California's current context, I wanted to just create a little bit of an understanding of the why. As Dr. Vang laid out, ED provided us, and I think you heard it at the last board meeting, and then coming into this board meeting, some flexibilities that we as California had already taken advantage of. We shortened the blueprint, we've provided remote administration, and we've taken action to extend the assessment window. And then the board took it a step further even by allowing a waiver for a science assessment, and then recognized the need that it still wasn't enough. There was still more that we were going to have to do. And as we come into California's current context and the feedback that we hear from stakeholders, I think that is something that you will hear very clearly, that in all these efforts that we've made over and beyond, there's still more that we need to address. So we're going to go into California's current context now. Next slide. Next slide.
Just a minute. It did this last time too.
Perfect. So California, as many of you know, has the largest and most diverse student population in the United States. We have more than 6 million students that attend kindergarten through grade 12, and nearly half of these students speak a language other than English at home. More than 300,000 teachers work in approximately 10,000 schools, and over 1,000 districts with student populations ranging from 4 to 590,000 students. Roughly 4.2 million students are assessed annually. Next slide. What we'd like to discuss today and give you a little bit of a picture, not only is California a diverse state, but we are also in the midst of transitioning from full-time in-person instruction to hybrid to distance learning only and back and forth. On January 25th, we began asking districts, charter schools, and private schools to submit their instructional status by school type. Consistent with health guidance, we are seeing more in-person instruction full-time and hybrid at the elementary level than the middle or high school level. And we're going to get into some maps here pretty quickly that show that. But I think it's important to note that during the novel coronavirus for 2019 pandemic, California LEAs have been balancing the learning needs of students and the challenges of planning for public safety while considering their local circumstances. LEAs have provided instruction through various models, including in-person instruction, distance learning, and hybrid. However, a vast majority of students are not yet attending class in person, but we're moving in that direction. Next slide. What you see before you is the GIS mapping to display primary mode of instruction that allows a visualization of how instruction is being provided across the state. This is publicly accessible on the California All website for Safe Schools Reopening. What you're seeing, the dark blue are the district boundaries that reflect schools that are in person, or districts that are in person within the district boundaries. Hybrid is light blue, and then yellow is distance learning only, and the white is no status available. Next slide, Mal. On this side, you'll see that charter schools are shown by school location. Again, the dark blue reflects the in-person instruction, the light blue reflects hybrid, and the yellow presents distance learning. Next slide. On March 8th, we will begin asking for planned reopening dates. We are seeing an increase in the number of districts with planned reopening dates in March and April, and expect 7,000 schools to be open by the end of March. On March 22nd, we will begin collecting school level information by student count pursuant of AB 86. Next slide. So in addition to the challenges faced as LEAs transition back to in-person instruction, many for the first time in over a year, technology also continues to be a barrier. 600,000 to 1 million students do not have access to quality high-speed internet connectivity at home. Even despite $2.1 billion of learning loss mitigation funds were spent on technology. And based on a recent survey about devices being used by students, over 376,000 students are using unmanaged Chromebooks. This is significant because in a normal year, 96% of all of our assessments happen on Google devices. Traditionally, students have used and shared devices that are wheeled around from classroom to classroom on carts for assessments. And this year, however, and I would say it's actually one of the bright spots that came out of COVID, the majority of students have, for the first time in California history, access to a device. This feat has been accomplished through the many efforts of the state of California, including those of our state superintendent and his relentless effort to close the digital divide. But over the course of the past few months, CDE has worked diligently with our testing vendor and with Google to secure options that would allow access to the secure browser, and are in continued discussion about how we might mitigate these issues. But again, 376,000 students are using the unmanaged Chromebooks and do not have access to the secure browser without this fix. Next slide. So that creates a little bit of the context of what California is facing in the midst of the pandemic. We also continue to hear feedback from stakeholders. Meeting the needs of a state as diverse as California is complex and nuanced in a normal year. The previous slides provided us a high-level overview of the current context of our state. The following slides incorporate the context from the voice of our stakeholders. Next slide. The discussion regarding assessments has been a dividing factor among groups, not just in California, but across the nation. Prior to our meeting on the 24th, there was a wide range of divergent perspectives about spring assessments. On one end, there was a clear cry to waive the requirement for all statewide assessments for the 2021 school year. And on the other side, an adamant need to ensure a clear understanding of the impact on student learning during the pandemic. In the last few weeks, there has been a coalescence around a few common themes. Recent letters provided the following input. Across the board, there is a strong interest in receiving valid data learning regarding how students have fared and to identify areas of learning loss or gaps. Some stakeholders want summative assessments to inform student learning and address learning loss, yet it continues to surface. We continue to see the issues that are persistent with bandwidth, internet access, and inconsistent testing environments, complicated by efforts to transition students back to in-person instruction. Some stakeholders request the suspension of the requirement for the administration of the statewide annual standardized summative assessments, and then others are asking for an option for LEAs to use local and/or interim assessments. This is where we're starting to coalesce. Everyone agrees results should be provided to parents and guardians, as well as made publicly available to the school and LEA level. Next slide. Recently, CDE conducted a brief survey asking LEAs what assessments they had in place as outlined underneath SB 98. The survey revealed the following. We had 969 unique LEAs respond to the survey. It was administered on March 5th, 2021. And what we see is that approximately 77% of respondents indicated that they have used the following 5 local assessments during the 2021 school year. STAR assessments by Renaissance, iReady by Curriculum Associates, Measures of Academic Progress by NWEA, Fast Bridges by Illuminate, and Reading Inventory by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. A little over 60% is comprised of the top 3, STAR, iReady, and MAP. About 19% of the respondents indicated that they have used another local assessment. The majority of those who responded that they have used other local assessments indicated that they are using the Smarter Balanced Interim Assessments or locally developed assessments. Next slide. In order to fulfill the request outlined by the board in Motion 5, taking into consideration California's current context, as well as the feedback provided by stakeholders across the state, CDE is proposing that for the 2021 school year, LEAs be allowed to use the most viable option for assessments in their local context, including the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments and CAAs, the alternate assessments for ELA and math, or other diagnostic, benchmark, or interim assessments that are aligned with the Common Core state standards for ELA and math, are available to assess students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11, are uniformly administered across a grade span school or district, and provide results that can be reported to parents, guardians, educators about individual students and to the public by school and by district, and are disaggregated by student group. Next slide, Mel. While the proposal presented today is specific to ELA and math, we want to briefly discuss the other assessments. While California will pursue a general waiver for the CAST and the CAA for science, the science test will continue to be available for any LEA to use during the 2021 school year. It is voluntary and it is their choice, but we will continue to make that available. In addition, all English learners must be administered the summative LPAC according to the English Learner Fact Sheet Addendum guidance that the ED provided on January 18th, 2021. The requirement for the summative has not and will not be waived. Next slide. We also wanted to highlight a few considerations that LEA should make as they're deciding which assessment is going to best suit their needs should the board choose to move forward with this recommendation. While the CDE understands that summative test administration of any kind may be challenging, these points are again ones that we want to bring to a high level. Providing the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for ELA and math to students in grade 11 will support the California State University Early Assessment Program requirements. It's important as high school districts and unified districts are making this consideration that they consider the 11th grade summative as the lead indicator for assessing school student readiness for CSU courses. Other indicators include GPA and course grades. And over the last few months, it has been noted there is an increase in the number of Ds and Fs students are receiving, at times for behavior reasons that do not reflect student learning. To be clear, it is not a mandate to provide the summative to 11th grade students. That's not what we're proposing, but should be a consideration in the decision-making process. Additionally, using the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for ELA and math will allow students to access the extensive universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations which they are familiar with as needed. Many of the accessibility resources available to students are built into assessment systems as tools, including Zoom, a universal tool that make text and graphics larger by selecting the Zoom in button, masking, a designated support that involves blocking off content that is not of immediate need to the student, so they're able to focus on a specific part of the test item, and American Sign Language and closed captioning. Again, not a mandate, but just things that should be taken into consideration that are available for the summative assessment. And then finally, the last consideration is that per state and federal statutes, LEAs will still be required to publicly report disaggregated report data disaggregated by student group in the School Accountability Report Card, or the SARC, and the Local Educational Agency Report Card, or LARC, the performance of students by assessment, and the number and percentage of students tested and not tested. Finally, we just want to share with the board some of our next steps should we move forward from today. CDE will and is committed to releasing CASP and LPAC summative assessment results when ready and appropriate when we are finished with assessments. Provide guidance for public reporting to LEAs that did not administer the summative assessments. Continue to support the field by providing office hours and coffee sessions. We have a meeting already scheduled for next week to give a debrief and overview of the assessments and the things discussed at the board today. And then also to develop clarification through frequently asked questions that we will publicly post. Last slide now. So finally, we come back to our revised recommendation. The California Department of Education recommends that the California State Board of Education delegate authority to CDE and or the SBE Executive Director to prepare general waiver to be submitted to U.S. Department of Education to the extent necessary to include the following. The CDE, again, is proposing to meet all of the current contexts that we have not yet been able to do so far, that for the 2021 school year, LEAs be allowed to use the most viable option for assessment in their local context, including the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments and CAAs for ELA and math, or other diagnostic, benchmark, or interim assessments that are, again, aligned with the California Common Core State Standards for ELA and math, are available to assess students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11, are uniformly administered across a grade span school or district, and provide results that can be reported to parents, guardians, educators about individual students and to the public by school and district, and are disaggregated by student groups. At this point, I'll turn it back over to President Darlene Hammond for any clarifying questions.
Thank you very much. I just want to express a great appreciation to Rachel, to Mao, to all the members of the staff who have really, dug in on the research, on the possibilities, conducting surveys, reaching out to the field, responding to stakeholder questions to get us to this moment of being able to consider these possibilities. I'm going to ask Member Sun, as one of our assessment liaisons, if she has initial comments. Then we'll see if there are any clarifying questions before we turn to public comment.
Yeah, just
Member Sun.
Thank you. So yeah, to echo President Darlene Hammond's comments as well, just a great thanks to both Rachel Maves and Malving for all of their work and leadership in this. This is not easy, I know, and you've done a tremendous job. As President Darlene Hammond said, doing the research, trying to make this balanced of the flexibility, and also address some of the concerns around ensuring that we get data to look at any exacerbated inequities that we have experienced during this pandemic. So I don't have much else to add to this. I look forward to the conversation with the rest of the board. And again, just really appreciate the recommendations that we've landed here today to allow that flexibility for LEAs.
That's great. And I'm going to see if, I think we probably ought to put up the public comment slide so people can begin to see the number as they queue up for public comment. I'm going to see if there's any clarifying questions at this time. I see Member Strauss. And let's keep it to clarifying questions now because we'll have plenty of time for discussion later. So Vice President Strauss and Member Burr.
My question, again, thank you so much for the presentation. Just my quick clarifying question. Should this be approved today, Deputy Superintendent Maves, we would, I assume, submit then to ED. When do we expect to hear back that if the waiver would be approved? And then when will districts know that it is okay to move ahead with our recommendation?
That I'm going to have to get back to you on a timeline for that, Member Strauss. We've had multiple conversations now with ED and are starting conversations with ledge staff. Everyone understands the urgency of this, and so we will be moving forward as quickly as possible.
And Member Burr.
Thank you, and I will associate myself with the comments of my colleagues about my great appreciation to Rachel and your staff for listening carefully to our conversation at our previous meeting and really doing some hard work to get to this recommendation. My specific question is, of the 5 assessments that were identified by the LEAs, can you tell me, are those assessments given in the same grade levels as the Smarter Balanced assessments, or are they different, and if so, how? Thank you.
So I'll share what my understanding of that is, and then Mal, perhaps if you're available to jump in as well. But my understanding for those assessments is that they are available K through 12. Mal, is that your understanding as well?
I think some specific ones may not have high school level, but most of them are at least elementary and middle school available.
Yeah, they differ across assessments, but most cover most grades.
Yes.
Any other clarifying questions? Okay, so we want to open up to public comment, and the public comment slide is up. And so we want to encourage any commenters to state their name and affiliation for the record. Remember to turn down the speaker volume of your computers if you're following the live feed. Speakers will be limited to 1 minute each. Are there any public comments?
Yes, currently we have 22 on the line. Callers, just a quick reminder, this is for item 2 only. Again, we are only taking calls for item 2 only. Caller, you are now live. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Dabrowski, the Assistant Superintendent of Education Services for Jurupa Unified School District in Riverside County. I speak today to support moving forward with this request to waive the requirement for CASP summative testing for the school year. As you know, many districts are engaged in the process of returning to in-person instruction, which is wonderful, but it's also a process that takes a huge amount of energy, resources, and adaptation for districts, teachers, students, and parents. This layers in more complexity to get in the way of successfully implementing the CASP testing process. In addition, our district, like many others, uses diagnostic assessments, which can be disaggregated and reported to parents and the public in lieu of CASP results. And while we recognize it's been difficult to not be able to take our students' temperature with a quality standardized assessment for the past year, we also know that using a thermometer inaccurately will yield inaccurate results and won't serve the greater good for our students and families in the way that our local diagnostic assessments would. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Michael McCormick, Superintendent of the Val Verde Unified School District. I would just echo the previous caller's comment. Michael Fullen says, this is the time for us to strengthen our internal accountability processes. We have those in place, and I would strongly encourage the board to allow us the option to use our internal accountability measures, which can be reported to students and parents and also reported by student groups. Thank you for today's opportunity to speak.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon.
Yes, you're live.
Good afternoon. My name is Gloria Ulloa Rodriguez, board member of the California Association for Bilingual Education, YOLO Woodland, Chapter 76. Our chapter would like to express our concern that English language learners who have been under an immense level of stress are being forced to take tests. With the many obstacles they have faced, we question the validity and reliability of tests taken under these conditions. Online learning for these students has been inequitable with the inconsistent access to digital device or the internet, limited understanding of English, and limited ability to work independently without support. English language learners should not have to miss vital instruction they need because of standardized testing. We do not want them to have time taken away from instruction during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
My name is Mercedes Levy, and I'm the Associate Superintendent in Oceanside Unified School District. We serve over 16,500 students, PK through grade 12, including military-connected students and children whose families work in agriculture. As we consider the best way to support our students, it's essential that assessment plans consider the need for action, accountability, and equity. Local assessments in our district provide us with the opportunity to assess students throughout the year. This is especially important to our military and migrant families whose children often move from school to school within the same year. Our local assessments allow us to assess students when they enroll, report to families about a child's needs, and develop an action plan within hours. Local assessments ensure accountability by enabling us to report student progress by student groups and for individual students. Local assessments allow us to effectively monitor and adjust the instructional program to meet student needs. I urge you to accept the recommendation to use local assessments to ensure action, accountability, and equitable plans for students rather than once-a-year tests.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Okay, this is Samuel Ayers. I am a 10-year-old special needs student in Fontana. I believe we do not need any more waivers for testing at this point. Please do not create any more waivers to reduce accountability for these assessments. By maintaining all these assessments as required, we will learn the actual impact the COVID had on all students. Today, I asked the California State Board of Education to protect special children. Please vote no on any waivers. Please follow me at the YouTube movement. Every student successful in education, less litigation, special education children matter. Thank you for your time. Surrounding area.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Thank you. This is Andrea Ball on behalf of the Orange County Department of Education. I want to thank the CDE staff for all the outreach in putting together this proposal. We signed on to the coalition letter and do support allowing the use of local interim assessments rather than requiring annual standardized summative assessments. Schools are bringing more students back to campuses. They're focused on that now. Across the diverse county, there has been an impact on student mental health and stress, and we think using local assessments to inform instruction and improvement are much better use of everyone's time and effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, Dr. Darlene Hammond and board members. Diana Liu, representing the Association of California School Administrators, would like to thank the board and the California Department of Education staff for the thoughtful work that has gone into the assessment flexibility request. AXA believes CDE's recommendation puts the safety and well-being of students first, while also ensuring student progress and data can be evaluated and reported to parents, educators, and the public by providing LEAs the flexibility to use the most viable option for assessments in their local context, including local assessments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Summer, Assistant Superintendent for Ukiah Unified School District. LEAs should be allowed to use the most viable option for assessment in their local context, including interim assessments. Our Common Core aligned interim assessments allow us to measure learning loss. We administer the assessments 3 to 4 times a year and have prior year data that will help us measure learning loss. In addition, we're able to create reports for parents, students, and the public. Additionally, our data can be disaggregated by subgroup using our platform and our student information systems. Again, please allow us the flexibility to use our local interim assessments this year in lieu of mandated federal and state testing requirements. Furthermore, we strongly support the waiving of the California Science Test. Both actions will help us maximize in-person instructional time. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. This is Carlos Machado with California School Board Association. We too would like to thank the board and its staff for all the work on this item. CSBA is also a signer onto the coalition letter to request the use of local assessments and which also seeks a waiver of the state and federal testing requirements. We think the proposal before you achieves that balance, and we appreciate your consideration of this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, President Darlene Hammond and members. This is Eric Premack with the Charter Schools Development Center. We'll also associate us with the comments thanking staff and the board for your careful consideration. We're fine with the pending proposal in front of you. We do, however, hope that you'll urge the Newsom administration and legislature to suspend the high-stakes test-based charter renewal laws.
until we have at least a few years of quote-unquote normal assessment data under our belt. We also hope that you all extend the type of flexibility you're contemplating here to the administration of the so-called verified data sources that charter schools are supposed to use for renewal purposes, including flexing the 95% participation expectation and allowing for remote administration, which the current rules do not allow. So we hope you'll consider all of that as part of this package. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, President Darlene Hammond and members of the board. I'm Jennifer Hicks, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services at the Placer County Office of Education and the 2021 CISC Chair. I'm sharing these comments on behalf of CISC and CSESA. We support the CDE's recommendation to pursue a waiver for the required administration of the state standardized assessments and allow LEAs to use the most viable option for assessment in their local context, whether that be the Smarter Balanced summative assessments or other diagnostic, benchmark, or interim assessments being used at the local level. These local assessments continue to be used to identify learning loss and guide plans for learning acceleration. They provide a meaningful way for LEAs to not only inform instruction and learning acceleration, but also report student progress to parents, stakeholders, and the public. I also want to thank the CDE staff for their thoughtful recommendations and ongoing engagement with the field. Thank you so much.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Enrique Arruacho, and I'm here representing the San Diego Unified School District. And I'm calling to express support for the flexibility to use local assessments to fulfill state requirements. In San Diego Unified, we are planning on the use of FAST for ELA and math, and also the district essential math indicators for grades 6 through 12. As we prepare for a return to in-person instruction, this flexibility will be essential. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
This is Beverly Eidman on behalf of the AXA Curriculum Instruction and Accountability Council and the King City Union School District. I also would like to implore the board to consider the flexibility that has been proposed by Rachel Mason staff. Our local districts need the flexibility to make this decision as we begin to transition from distance learning to hybrid. When we are finally back in person, we will have part of our population still in the distance learning mode. In spite of having hotspots for every student, we're having connectivity issues for these students. And our local assessments have been very successful, and utilizing our iReady assessments in an ongoing manner will allow us to really fine-tune where we need to focus our instruction in the summer and going into the fall. We believe that this is in the best interest of students as we begin this transition to allow
Thank you, caller. Your time has ended.
Social emotional learning.
Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Mary Ann Grosner, I'm a parent. The state has already taken steps towards flexibilities. They shortened the Smarter Balance testing for English and math back in November 2020 and offer LEAs remote administration of CASP and LPAC. As you are aware, case rates are dropping and more of the community has access to the vaccines. We are looking at returning our kids back to school full-time in the very near term. Creating more flexibilities or waivers seems like we're taking a step backwards. With more than 6 billion students attending California K-12 schools and nearly half of whom speak a language other than English at home, providing education is so extremely important. Let's not create any more waivers to reduce the accountability for these assessments. English language learners and all students deserve better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Diaz from Californians Together, and the following is a message that we received from a teacher in Los Angeles Unified School District who wanted her words shared with the board as she is currently teaching remotely. I truly hope that the board makes the right decision. Right now, I am grappling with having to administer the LPAC, reading inventory, IABs, and CAPS all within the next 2 months. When do we teach? Especially during this pandemic when many of our teachers only see their students twice a week. It is unrealistic. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Emily McGinnis, Director of Data Analysis and Accountability for Campbell Union School District. Like other LEAs, we have local measures whose results can be communicated to families and the public, disaggregated by student groups, and provide a consistent measure for reporting out and acting upon student learning loss. I speak today in support of the waiver as flexibility and use of local assessments allow LEAs to focus on supporting our students' socio-emotional well-being as they return to in-person learning. Now more than ever, flexibility and attention to current local context is essential. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, my name is David Arias, father of 3 kids with special needs. I believe don't need any more waivers for testing at this point. Please don't create any more waivers to reduce accountability for these assessments by maintaining all assessments required. Today, I ask the California State Board of Education to protect special children. Please vote no for any waivers. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello?
Yes, you're live.
I'm live?
Yes, please go ahead with
Okay.
your comment.
I'm sorry. I didn't have a number. Hi, this is Susan Nisman with Speak Up Parents, United Parents in Los Angeles. And I want to thank the board and the staff for their work in coming to some consensus and agreement on how best to assess the learning loss as our children return to school, and looking at it as a teaching tool for our teachers and educators and parents in terms of understanding that the value of these assessments is that they're not to be punitive, and they won't be used to limit student access to grade level coursework, and that all schools and stakeholders understand the logistics of participating in the assessments, and that this must be communicated so that it's understood that this is all information that's being gathered for the purpose of understanding what resources, identifying where these gaps come
Thank
from.
you, caller.
Thank you.
Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Good afternoon, Board President and members of the board. Leticia Garcia on behalf of the Riverside County Superintendent of Schools and the 23 school district superintendents of Riverside County. Our educational leaders joined the Coalition of Education Management and Educators to request the board to pursue a waiver for the required state tests for the current school year. We believe that staff's recommendation address our concerns and allow LEAs the flexibility to determine which is the most feasible option for assessments based on their local context. Thank you very much for all this hard work.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, I'm Mrs. Loya. I'm a San Bernardino teacher. I don't agree with having waivers for testing, as testing helps us know how much a student has learned. Let's not create more waivers. We already reduced their learning time. Let's help our students stay away protected from any waivers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Yes, good afternoon to the board. My name is Lisa Bennett. I'm a special education teacher in LAUSD. The emotional struggles, pressure, and demands on our students during crisis distance learning has been monumental. I have not been with my students in a physical space for 1 year now. I have new students in my class that I've never met in person. A requirement for a statewide assessment is absolutely the last thing students need in their lives at this time. They are surviving a pandemic. The data will not be valid or reliable, nor will it guide my instruction. In addition, accommodations for students with disabilities, as written in the IEP, are not feasible in a remote environment. I would like our school district to be able to use local assessments. Let's not continue to put unnecessary pressure on our students. They've suffered enough. They've done the best they can under the circumstances. A test does not reflect all they have accomplished during this year. Nothing has been standardized in how we've been educating our students this year, so a test should not be standardized either. I urge you to use local recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, Madam President and members of the board. This is Brian Rivas calling on behalf of the Education Trust West. We continue to believe that proceeding with statewide summative assessments is the best option, and that's primarily because we think that's the best way to see what happened to student learning during the pandemic and provide actionable data. If you proceeded with the summative assessments, some of the issues that have been laid out in the staff report would be addressed, including ensuring assessments are standards aligned, that there are accommodations for English language learners, and that there is uniform reporting. At the same time, we see that you may be open to local assessments. If you proceed with that option or providing the flexibility for local assessments, we recommend that there be strong guidance issued by the Department of Education, and that would include providing a list of approved assessments to ensure.
Your time has ended. Thank you, caller. Next caller, please list your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, this is Robert Manwaring calling from Children Now. We worked with the Ed Trust West to write a coalition letter that included equity groups, parent groups, and business groups. So I'll associate my comments with the previous speaker. Wanted to build out a couple of things. One is to the extent that you use a local assessments, that you provide some quality guardrails, particularly around accommodation and supports for English learners and special needs students. And in terms of reporting the data, since most of the school districts are likely to use a small list of tools, we would suggest providing some standardized reporting that would be reported up to the states for the local education agency report cards. And finally, we systematically oppose the waiver for science. All the major issues that California faces right now, a pandemic, wildfire seasons that we've had, climate change, they all depend upon.
Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now. Caller, are you on the line?
Good afternoon. Martha Zaragoza Diaz, representing the California Association for Bilingual Education and Californians Together. We support the use of local district assessments, but request that the motion include referencing designated supports and accommodations to be made available to students who are taking the CAS for mathematics and English language arts, and that districts use these accessibility strategies as they have implemented in the past to the best of their abilities, including providing bilingual versions of the mathematics assessments. These designated supports and accommodations increase equitable access to assessments by all students and allow students to show what they know and can do. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, President Darling Hammond and board members. This is Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. We support the approach recommended by the department today in the addendum. We urge the board to be explicit about and direct the department to communicate clearly to LEAs and the public that social emotional supports and expanded learning activities should be prioritized over test prep, and that the purpose of testing is to provide actionable information to parents, educators, and the public, so that they can program services and actions in expanded learning session or the next year. The overriding need at this time is for LEAs to assess and respond to the needs of those of their students that have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, Any waiver request to the U.S. Department of Ed should be conditioned on assurances that this level of accountability will take place, and we suggest for specific student groups that are identified by local data. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Lucero Chavez, speaking on behalf of the Parent Institute for Quality Education, or PIQUE, a national family engagement organization founded in San Diego. As decisions on assessments are made, we urge the board to keep our families in mind, many of whom are still struggling to mitigate their students' learning loss due to the ongoing pandemic. We urge the board to direct CDE to communicate clearly to LEAs and our families that social emotional supports and expanded learning activities should be prioritized over test preparation, and that the purpose of testing is only to inform upcoming programming and services. We would like to highlight the need for home language communication, one-to-one modes of communication, specifically for eligible students and their families, and modes of communication that are accessible and culturally responsible to families' needs. Thank you to board and staff for your work on behalf of our students and their families.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. This is Maria Arias. I am the founder of the YouTube movement, Every Student Successful, More Education, Less Litigation. And I'm here also to speak on behalf of the special education community. I have 3 children with special needs, and I believe that the LEAs or schools do not need any more waivers for testing at this point. We really need to learn how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected education, and we need the assessment to be required as is so we can learn what the actual impact was on all students. So today I ask the California State Board of Education to protect all children, including special education children. So please vote no on any waivers and kindly support our special ed children by following us on the YouTube movement. Thank you very much for your support. Have a great day.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, State Board members. My name is Sheila Whitley, and I'm representing the California Teachers Association. CTA strongly recommends that the State Board adopt the CDE's recommended action in the addendum for Item 2 with one caveat. CTA believes that the CDE and SBE must clearly communicate to the field that the SBAC would not be required and that appropriate diagnostic, benchmark, or interim assessments can and should be used to provide data to parents, educators, and the public. Over 60,000 teachers and community members have signed our petition to waive state tests and to continue to plead their case as the importance of spending more time on the mental and emotional health of our students and the academic needs that they have. CTA stands ready to support the efforts of the CDE and SBE to fulfill the requirements under the waiver proposal.
Thank you, caller. Your time's ended.
For the implementation across the state.
Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. Lorraine Richards speaking as a parent. Please consider students being first for valued instruction and not use them for the sheer factor of getting data that we already know what it will state. The use of local assessments allows the LEA to choose the test that will work for their population during these times and what the population is most familiar with. If we have learned anything during these times are what is possible. Therefore, make it possible to allow the professionals to choose what the best fit is for their population. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Everybody in my family, by the end of the month, will have the shot.
Caller, you're live.
Yeah. Hopefully my sisters can get it. Me and my mom were able to get it.
Caller, you're live at the State Board of Education.
Oh, hi. My name is Janet Ilko. I am with the Health Sciences High Middle College, and I am calling in support of making sure that all of our students, especially our English learners, have the opportunity to show their growth in multiple ways. The pandemic has been an extremely challenging time for our students and our teachers, and I am very excited to see and listen today that there will be options for our kids that honor their diversity, their voice, and what we care about. So thank you so much.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hello, this is Emily Arias. I am a 14-year-old student in Fontana, and I believe that LEAs do not need any more waivers for testing at this point. Please do not create any more waivers to reduce accountability for these assessments. By maintaining all the assessment as required, we will learn the actual impact the COVID had on all students. Today, I asked the California State Board of Education to protect special children. Please vote no for any waivers. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Hi, my name is Emily Diaz. I'm a parent in San Diego Unified and also a co-founder of Reopen SDUSD. I'm urging the board to vote no on any additional waivers. I can tell you we hear from parents every day. They have no idea where their kids are at. They are desperate for information, and our district did local assessments in the fall. So what concerns me of localizing things is that is just not going to make it out to parents, and they're not going to have anything comparable. In terms of them being online and the challenges with that, I find it astounding that districts bring that up as a reason not to test. For me, it's the exact reason why we should test, because it's the perfect reflection of what kids are dealing with right now. And we need to know. We must have this data if we're going to be able to move forward and solve these problems correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
This is Dr. Mary McNeil, Superintendent of the Needles Unified School District on the California-Arizona-Nevada border. I'm requesting support for local options for an assessment program this year. For many years, we've used the NWEA MAP assessment in ELA and math as benchmarks in kindergarten through 12th grade. We believe that this same assessment would provide us with immediate information we need to determine how to accelerate learning following this year's instructional platforms, as well as provide realistic data for both parents in district and our public. We want to assess and receive valid data now to determine where students are and how we can move forward. We have cohorts of in-person instruction. We can work with parents to assess on-site and online using our laptops and hotspots. We can develop reports for district, parents, and the public. And we have the ability to report individual and student groups to best understand how to reach each and every student. Thank you for your consideration of supporting local options.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now.
Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Darling Hammond, Superintendent Thurman, and members of the State Board. My name is Nick Romley. I'm calling on behalf of Dr. Mary Ann DeWan, County Superintendent of Schools in the Santa Clara County Office of Education. Just quickly, Dr. DeWan would really like to thank the board and CDE staff for all their hard work and for their outreach to education stakeholders, and would ask that the board approve CDE's recommendation that for the 2020-21 school year, LEAs be able to use the most viable option for the assessment in their local context. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Next caller, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Your time starts now. Caller,
hello.
Yes, caller, you're live.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that I had requested this. I am a teacher, and I'm also in public schools for 17 years, and I'm also an elected school board trustee. And I am grateful to see CDC's recommendations, and I am calling in support of those local options for our students. Roughly 40% of our students are remaining virtual, and our third and fourth graders have never seen the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Giving them Smarter Balanced Assessment would be a huge and unfair burden for our learners, cause stress, and take away from our precious instructional minutes. Allowing the local assessments that students and teachers are already familiar with provides meaningful data and better options. Thank you so much, and sorry for my glitch at the beginning.
Thank you, caller. This concludes public comment.
Thank you very much. Board members, this is our opportunity for discussion, and we could take the public comment slide down now so we can see each other, which will be helpful. I'll be watching the raised hand function in the participant queue, and to kick us off, I'm going to start with Vice President Strauss.
Thank you, President Darling-Hammond. So again, I wanted to thank Deputy Superintendent Maves and Dr. Mao Vang for the presentation and really setting the context. Just thinking about districts going forward, should we take action today? This is really directed to Deputy Superintendent Maves. I'm interested in what specific guidance will be given to districts. I know you're thinking about it. I'm just interested in when they'll get the guidance, what kind of guidance they'll get regarding reporting requirements based on this potential waiver requirement, and particularly how to address the separate subgroups. So I know that's a lot, but I know you've been thinking about it, and I'd appreciate any clarification.
So you had a few questions in there, Member Strauss, and I'll try to see if I can hit all of them. The first one that I heard you ask was about communication. So I think that we have found actually a pretty good rhythm in these office hours that we had started in the coffee sessions. They are a weekly meeting that we continue to provide updates, and I think that it's created a regular routine and rhythm that we can utilize as we continue to discuss and provide guidance to LEAs. So I think as far as communication goes, we have a pretty good platform. We understand that there's going to need to be a lot of support in the field as this continues to move forward. We will be sending out an email very shortly after the board meeting to the field, letting them know of what has decided at the board, providing some supporting resources for that, including registration links to our meeting next week on Wednesday to discuss some of the updates and any guidance that we have between now and then. So we understand that, and we are putting some things in place to make sure that we're increasing communication. The second thing that I heard you ask is about what specific guidance we might be sharing with LEAs. I think outside of, and one of the things that I appreciate about Motion 5 that the board provided is that it already created some pretty specific guardrails for us. So I think there's pretty clear guidance that whatever assessment they choose, we've provided some considerations to be thinking about with the 11th grade and the additional accommodations. We've made it pretty clear that the expectation for reporting is going to be through the SARC, and that they should be able to aggregate and disaggregate that data. 60% are using the iReady, MAP, and STAR, and those are K-12 assessments that are available, and you can aggregate and disaggregate those by student group. So that piece, I feel like the motion and what we're recommending today provides some pretty clear guide rails. There will be other things that we are going to have to discuss. Today was really about the policy discussion. We will have a multitude of ongoing discussions internally to continue to decide how we support the implementation of this moving forward. And I would be happy to bring back in May, or Dr. Mao Vang can bring back in May an update with what we've done so far.
Thanks so much. Member Rucker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maves and Dr. Vang, for your very thorough presentation to the board about the many facets that this waiver would have an impact on. I especially appreciate the time you took to talk to us about the status of the assessment activities going on in the districts at this time. The purpose behind what the federal government is intending in issuing the opportunity to apply for this waiver is to make sure that information is published concerning the impact of the pandemic on the academic gains and the instructional program of our students. I clearly heard a lot of those concerns and those very clear distinctions about how many stakeholders, particularly our parents, feel about the impacts of the pandemic on what's happening with their child's school experience over the past year or so. So it doesn't take rocket science to understand those things, but at the same time, there is a desire to have some uniform way and some uniform set of data points to further this discussion and even validate some of the concerns or opinions. So I really do appreciate not only what you did in sharing with us where we are at this point, but the likely impacts and next steps as we move forward in this discussion. The one question I do have about this particular waiver is not so much the timeline for the approval, but with each successive week, there are more and more districts whose assessment window will open. So how would the approval of this waiver with the ideas and the options described change the choices or the directions that districts who have begun testing would have in front of them?
Well, right now, we're moving forward with assessments as we have been. And we've said that from the very beginning, that until we we didn't have board approval before today either. So we have some other boxes that we need to check. As soon as some of those boxes have been checked, this is the first step in moving that forward with your decision as the State Board of Education. Then it allows us to bring very quickly the general waiver, if necessary, to ED, as well as the required information for the legislature to hopefully make the same decision and provide relief from the state requirements. So assuming all of those things happen moving forward, then LEAs have the choices exactly outlined within the recommendation that we're making. They could choose to move forward and continue to do the summative assessment if they feel like that best meets their current context and their student needs. They could choose to use another locally administered assessment that they were required to have under SB 98 to already in place to assess and monitor their students' progress. So those choices would be up to the local LEA to decide based on their current context and need.
Thank you for answering that question. The reason why I asked the question in the way I did, I heard very clearly from many stakeholders the concern that something would be lost by the board approving an action that basically cancels statewide testing. And that's not what this particular action is intended to do. It's intended to maximize the options and the flexibilities that LEAs have for their testing and assessment regimen that's currently in place, and to give them the local option to choose the best pathway for them to proceed to continue with doing an assessment and then developing a report from that assessment. So that is the reason why I asked you that question. I know it probably seemed very pedantic, and I thank you for taking the time to respond in the way that you did.
I'm just glad I got it right.
Member Burr?
Thank you. So sort of to piggyback on what Member Rucker said, I just want to reinforce what it says in our item and clarify this, that according to the Stakeholder Survey that the department did, approximately 77% of the LAA respondents indicated they have used the following 5 local assessments during the 2021 school year. Mm-hmm. So I assume that means to date, they have been using these formative or interim assessments. Rachel's shaking her head yes. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important. And I do think that it confirms what Member Rucker was speaking to, that local LEAs have decided what works best for them. My second question is, and it's going to sound like I'm kind of hung up on this because I am, relates to the grade levels, because I understand that for purposes of a federal waiver, mm-hmm. we have to address the grade levels that we're required to test in. And we want to be clear that if LEAs choose those, they're reporting in those grade levels. But I'm wondering, because, and I'll just say my most important desire is that parents have the maximum amount of information available. If LEAs are in fact using these local assessments across grade levels, will there be an expectation in your communications to them that they also report those results to the extent they have them in grade levels other than those that the feds require us to test in?
That's a great question, Member Burr. I think that when we look at the recommendation, grades 3 through 8 and 11, as you noted, are the ones that are required underneath our federal requirements and our state requirements. I do think that best practice is to communicate that information at every grade level that you have assessments available. But we can continue to have those conversations and then come back with an update of what that guidance looks like at the May meeting.
Thank you. I do not see other board members asking for recognition, which may mean that we are ready for a motion. Do I have a motion?
I would move CDE's recommendation.
Thank you, Member Sun. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion of the motion? Seeing no hands raised, Brooks will call a roll call vote, please.
Member Burr.
Aye.
President Darling Hammond.
Aye.
Member Fatah.
Aye.
Member Glover Woods.
Aye.
Member McQuillan.
Yes.
Member Navo.
Aye.
Member Patillo Brownson.
Yes.
Member Rodriguez.
Aye.
Member Rucker.
Yes.
Vice President Strauss.
Aye.
Member Sun.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Well, we have concluded more expeditiously than we thought we might, but we have 2 long days ahead of us. So I want to ask Brooks whether we could take the closed session now to free us up a little bit more in the next 2 days, or whether we should adjourn.
I believe we should adjourn as the folks are anticipating the other times to be available.
Yeah, well, we will continue to have all those other times available, but it's just us for closed session. However, given that we have been so timely today, you get some time back, and I want you to hold on to this momentum as we get ready to go through the next couple of days. And Member Rodriguez, did you want to make a comment? I saw your hand go up.
No, that was accidental.
Okay. That was your dog, right? Jumping on your... All right. With that, I adjourn today's session at 4:21 p.m., and I will see you at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.